There is something you will notice the moment you walk into a Japanese home. Not what's there, what isn't. No drawer that won't close. No cabinet stuffed with things that might be useful someday. No surface covered in objects that have been there so long they've become invisible. And the feeling that produces that immediate physical calm the moment you cross the threshold isn't interior design. It isn't money. It isn't a cultural personality trait you either have or don't. It's the result of a specific relationship with objects that Japanese culture built over centuries, a relationship most Western homes have never developed, not because it's complicated, but because nobody ever explained what it actually is. Today I'm going to explain it, and by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why you hold on to things you don't need, and what the Japanese do instead that makes their homes feel the way they feel. Stay with me, because the answer isn't what most people expect. The Western relationship with objects. In Western culture, we have a word for the accumulation of things: abundance. More is security. More is success. More means you were prepared, you were thoughtful, you were someone who didn't have to go without. The full cabinet is reassuring. The garage that holds decades of accumulated life tells a story of a life fully lived. The drawer stuffed with things that might someday be useful reflects a person who plans ahead. Except that's not what it reflects. Not really. What it actually reflects is something much more uncomfortable, a series of decisions that were never made. Every object in your home that doesn't belong there, that has no clear purpose in your current life, no designated home, no regular use, exists because at some point you chose not to choose. You picked up the item, held it for a moment, felt the mild discomfort of deciding, and put it down somewhere. And it has been there ever since, waiting for a decision that keeps not arriving. Western culture gave that behavior a name that makes it sound responsible. We call it keeping things just in case. The Japanese have a different name for it: fuyu no mono, the unnecessary thing. And in Japanese philosophy, the unnecessary thing is never neutral. It is never simply taking up space without consequence. It is taking up space in your mind, in your attention, in the low-frequency background noise of your daily awareness that registers every unresolved thing in your environment, every open loop, every deferred decision, every object that silently asks to be dealt with and receives no answer. You don't notice this noise because you've been living with it so long it has become the ambient sound of your life. The Japanese notice it because they learned generations ago how much quieter life becomes when it stops. 1. Objects actually cost. When you buy something, you pay once, but you never stop paying. This is the truth at the center of Japanese relationship with possessions, and the truth most Western thinking about money and objects completely misses. The price tag is the smallest cost of anything you own. Everything you keep costs you space. Not just the physical space it occupies, though that is real and measurable, but the spatial weight it contributes to every room it inhabits. A room filled with objects, even beautiful, well-organized objects, has a different visual weight than a room with intentional breathing space. And visual weight translates directly into cognitive load. Your brain processes everything in your visual field continuously, whether you're paying attention or not. Everything you keep costs you time. The time spent cleaning around it, organizing it, moving it to access something else, deciding where it goes when you reorganize, replacing it when it breaks, and eventually deciding what to do with it when it has clearly outlived its usefulness. Everything you keep costs you attention, not the conscious, focused attention you give to things you care about, the background attention that your brain allocates automatically to unresolved items in your environment. Every object without a clear home, without a clear purpose, without a clear reason for being where it is, registers as an open loop that your mind tracks quietly alongside everything else you're trying to think about. And everything you keep costs you clarity. Because a mind processing hundreds of low-level environmental demands has less capacity for the thoughts that actually matter. The creative work, the meaningful conversation, the genuine rest, the clear decision-making that shapes the quality of your life. Japanese culture calculated this cost intuitively before any of it was measured scientifically. And the calculation produced a simple, demanding conclusion. Nothing earns a place in your home by default. Everything must justify its presence through genuine, regular service to the life actually being lived, not the life that was lived before, not the life that might theoretically be lived someday, but the specific actual life of the person living there now. The emotional truth underneath. There is a harder question underneath all of this, one that most conversations about decluttering carefully avoid. Why do we keep things we don't need? Not the practical answer, because we might need them someday, because they were expensive, because someone gave them to us. Those are the reasons we give ourselves. They are not the actual reasons. The actual reasons are more personal and more uncomfortable. We keep things because they represent versions of ourselves we aren't ready to release. The guitar in the corner isn't a guitar anymore. It's the person you believed you were going to become. The formal clothes that no longer fit aren't clothes. They're a period of your life you haven't yet made peace with leaving. The books you'll never read aren't books. They're the identity you wanted to project, the intellectual life you planned but didn't build. We keep things because releasing them feels like admitting something, that the project is finished, that the relationship is over, that the person you were when you acquired this object is someone you've moved past, that the future you were keeping it for isn't coming. We keep things because empty space feels like loss. In Western culture, the empty shelf reads as lack. The clear drawer suggests you don't have enough. The unoccupied corner seems to be waiting for something rather than being deliberately clear. We have been so thoroughly taught to associate fullness with abundance that we have lost the ability to feel empty space as anything other than a problem to be solved. And we keep things because making decisions is hard. Not the big decisions, those we make eventually when the cost of not deciding becomes unbearable. The small decisions, the daily low-stakes, seemingly insignificant decisions about objects that don't quite belong anywhere, those we defer indefinitely. And the deferral accumulates into the physical landscape of indecision that most Western homes become over years of lived life. Japanese philosophy addresses all of this not with judgment, but with clarity. Dansshari, the three-part practice of refusing, discarding, and separating from attachment. The word combines three concepts: the refusal to allow unnecessary things to enter, the act of releasing what no longer serves, and the practice of loosening the emotional grip of objects on your identity. It is not a cleaning method. It is a form of self-examination. And what it examines, honestly without avoidance, is the question that every object in your home implicitly poses. Why are you still holding on to this? Sakalsan ruur stamfordabos. Chandi. What the home reflects. In Japanese philosophy, the home is not a container for your life. It is a reflection of it. Iwakagami. Bihondistama. The home is a mirror. What you find when you look honestly at your living space is a more accurate picture of your inner state than almost anything else available to you. The accumulation of unneeded things reflects accumulated unmade decisions. The objects kept from a past that has ended reflect an unwillingness to fully inhabit the present. The drawer that can't close reflects the low-level overwhelm of too many unresolved things competing for the same limited space in your attention. And the surface that's been covered for so long you no longer see what's on it reflects the way familiarity breeds invisibility, the way we stop seeing what we've stopped choosing. This isn't a judgment. It's an observation that Japanese culture has made consistently and honestly for centuries and then used constructively. Because if the home reflects the self, then changing the home changes something in the self, not metaphorically, neurologically. The research on this is clear. Visual complexity raises cortisol levels. Clutter increases baseline anxiety. The presence of unfinished business in your environment, even the unconscious perception of objects that need attention, activates the same stress response systems that respond to genuine threats. And the reverse is equally documented. Clearing physical space produces measurable reductions in anxiety. Making decisions about objects, even small ones, trains the decision-making systems of the brain. Releasing things that no longer serve your current life creates a genuine, experienced sense of agency and clarity. Japanese homes feel the way they feel, not because of the architecture or the aesthetics, because the people who live in them made a decision, ongoing, daily, consistently renewed, to let their external environment honestly reflect their internal one, and to keep that reflection honest by releasing what no longer belongs in the picture. The fear of empty space. Here is where Western and Japanese sensibility diverge most completely. In Western homes, empty space is a problem. An empty shelf is a shelf that needs something on it. An empty corner is a corner that needs furniture. An empty drawer is a drawer that hasn't been filled yet. We treat unoccupied space as potential waiting to be realized, and the realization of potential in this framework always involves adding something. Japanese philosophy has a different concept entirely. Ma, the art of empty space, not space waiting to be filled. Space that is the point, space that is itself the thing of value. In traditional Japanese art, the unpainted areas of a canvas are as intentional as the painted ones. In Japanese architecture, the space between structural elements is as considered as the elements themselves. In Japanese music, the silence between notes is as deliberate as the notes. Ma is not absence. It is presence of a different kind, the presence of breathing room, the presence of possibility, the presence of peace in a space that has not been colonized by objects competing for your attention. Western culture treats silence as a problem to be filled with sound. Empty time as a problem to be filled with activity, empty space as a problem to be filled with things. Japanese culture treats all three as resources, as the conditions under which something real can actually happen, as the environment in which the mind can rest, the creative thought can arrive, the genuine conversation can occur, the actual experience of being in your own home can take place. When every surface is occupied, every drawer full, every corner claimed, the home stops being a place where you rest and becomes a place where you manage. You don't inhabit it, you navigate it. Japanese minimalism clears space not to create emptiness, but to create possibility, to make room for the life actually being lived rather than the accumulated evidence of all the lives that came before it. What Japan understood about impermanence. Japan is a country that has been rebuilt from catastrophe more than once. Earthquakes that level cities in minutes, fires that erase neighborhoods overnight, floods and tsunamis that take in seconds what took generations to build. This relationship with loss, the deeply cultural understanding that everything material is temporary, that attachment to objects carries a risk proportional to the depth of the attachment, produced something in Japanese philosophy that is difficult to find in cultures that have lived with greater physical security. A genuine comfort with impermanence. Mono no aware. The bittersweet awareness of impermanence. The understanding embedded in Japanese aesthetics and daily life. That the transience of things is not a tragedy, but the condition that makes beauty possible. The cherry blossom is beautiful partly because it lasts a week. The handmade bowl is precious partly because it is unique and fragile. What you cannot hold on to, you can still appreciate fully while it is here. And what you can let go of, you can release without grief, because the attachment was never to the thing itself, but to what the thing represented. And what it represented lives in you, not in the object. This is why Japanese culture developed practices of gratitude toward objects being released. Not as sentimentality, but as honest acknowledgement. This served a purpose. That purpose is complete. The object can leave, and the value it provided remains in the person it served. The clothes that carried you through a period of your life did their work. You are not discarding the memory of that period when you release the clothes. You are completing a cycle that the clothes were part of, and freeing both the object and yourself from an attachment that no longer serves either. The practice. How Japanese homes actually maintain this. The philosophy is clear. The practice is specific. Japanese home maintenance is not organized around the periodic event of decluttering, the annual overhaul, the seasonal purge, the weekend of finally dealing with everything that accumulated. These events address the symptoms without treating the cause. The cause is always the same. Things entered the home without evaluation, accumulated without decision, and eventually required removal in quantities that feel overwhelming because they were never processed individually when they arrived. Japanese practice treats the point of entry as the critical moment. Genkan no furui, to many the entry filter. At the threshold of the home, a quiet evaluation occurs. What earns entry? Not what fits, not what was acquired, not what arrived without invitation. What genuinely serves the life being lived here? Mail processed at the entry point rather than set on the nearest surface. Purchases assessed before they cross into the living space rather than set down temporarily and forgotten. Gifts received with gratitude and evaluated honestly rather than kept out of obligation. The threshold is where the home is protected. Once something has crossed it and found a surface, inertia takes over. The object is harder to release at month 6 than it was at the door. The decision costs more at year 2 than it would have cost at the moment of arrival. Beyond the entry filter, Japanese home practice maintains what might be called a living inventory, an ongoing, honest awareness of what every space in the home contains and why. Not perfect knowledge of every object, but a genuine relationship with the space that notices when something is no longer earning its place. The seasonal practice of osuji, the deep cleaning that accompanies seasonal transitions, includes this evaluation. Every space is examined not just for cleanliness, but for relevance. Does this still serve this household as it currently exists? Not as it existed a year ago. Now. The question isn't asked in a spirit of deprivation, it's asked in a spirit of care. For the home, for the life it houses, and for the people whose clarity and calm are directly shaped by the quality of the space they inhabit every day. What changes when you start? People who begin releasing what doesn't belong in their homes almost universally describe the same sequence of experiences. First, resistance. The objects that have been there longest are the hardest to evaluate honestly. They've become part of the landscape, invisible through familiarity, their presence normalized by years of daily non-decision. Then, a kind of confrontation, because each object, examined honestly, asks the question that was avoided when the object arrived and every time since. Why are you still holding on to this? And the answer, when given honestly, is almost never practical. It is almost always emotional. An unfinished story, an unacknowledged grief, a self-image being maintained by objects rather than by living. Then, gradually, relief. The first cleared surface feels disproportionately significant. The first drawer that opens to genuine order and closes easily feels like something was resolved that had been quietly unresolved for years. The first room that produces calm when you enter it, rather than the low-level friction of managed clutter, feels like a different kind of space. And then you begin to understand what Japanese homes have always been. Not spare, not cold, not lacking, clear, honest. A space that reflects a life examined with intention, rather than accumulated without thought. A space where every object was chosen rather than retained by default. A space that gives back calm rather than continuously requesting management. And then something quieter and more significant happens. The relationship with new objects changes. When you have experienced the cost of keeping what doesn't belong, the moment of acquisition becomes different. The question arises at the point of purchase rather than at the point of purging. Does this earn a place in what I've built? Is this worth what it will cost me to own it? Not the price, the actual ongoing cost of its presence in my life. That question, asked consistently, is the practice. Not a one-time transformation, a continuously renewed relationship with the things you allow into the space where you live. That is what Japanese homes reflect, not the result of a single decluttering event. The accumulated result of thousands of small, honest decisions made consistently over time. Everything in this video, the philosophy, the room-by-room practice, the daily habits that make this sustainable rather than a one-time event, is organized into a complete system in one place. It's called the Japanese system. Make your home organize itself. 49 pages. The 5 principles behind Japanese home culture. A room-by-room implementation guide. A reset framework for starting from wherever you currently are, and the daily, weekly, and monthly practices that keep the system working without constant effort. It's $19. The link is in the description. Now, the most important thing. The most important thing. The reason Japanese people don't keep useless things is not discipline. It is not cultural programming, not a genetic predisposition toward order, not a lifestyle trend that arrived and will eventually pass. It is a decision, made clearly, renewed consistently, grounded in a simple and honest understanding. The space where you live shapes the mind you think with. The objects you surround yourself with are not neutral. They are active participants in your daily experience, some contributing to the quality of your attention, your rest, your clarity, others subtracting from it, quietly, invisibly, continuously. Ie wa jiban no kagami. The home is a mirror of the self, and the self reflected in a clear, intentional, honest space is a different self than the one navigating accumulated decisions, managing the residue of past versions, working around the physical evidence of everything that was never resolved. You do not need to become someone else to begin this. You do not need a weekend, a major life transition, or a perfect plan. You need one honest question, applied to one object today. Does this serve the life I am actually living right now? Not the life I lived before. Not the life I might live someday. The actual, specific, present life that exists in this home, in this season, for this version of who I am. If the answer is yes, it stays, and it stays with intention. If the answer is no, it leaves, not with guilt, not with the complicated grief of releasing something that was never really serving you anyway, with the quiet, genuine relief of a decision finally made. That is where Japanese minimalism begins, not with an empty room, with an honest answer. Subscribe, Kyaita-am, because every week this channel goes deeper into what Japan figured out about living well and what the rest of us are still learning to see. See you next video.